Hola a todos y bienvenidos a la segunda charla educativa de Instituto Marangoni Miami. Hoy vamos a hablar con Lucy Norris en Inglaterra y con ella vamos a hablar de la humanización de e-commerce y vamos a tocar también su argumento importante que es el resale e e-commerce. Lucy, how are you and welcome to Costa Rica Fashion Week.
How exciting! I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm coming all the way from a tiny little village outside Manchester in the UK, so I'm very glad to be with you all virtually in Costa Rica right now.
So, hola and bienvenida to Costa Rica officially. Lucy, you are a content and communications expert. You've consulted and you've led digital strategies for several global luxury brands. And your consumer trends and your reporting background has led you to start some initiatives, one of them being the humanization of e-commerce. And another one, which we're going to sort of touch on as well, is looking at re-commerce and resale. So we're really excited to have you here today and to hear what you have to say about this important topic.
Excellent. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of it.
Great. So I think we could go in. I don't know if you just want to maybe give a little more background about yourself and then we can start the presentation.
Yeah, of course. And just so I know the presentation everyone can see right now, just as I start scrolling through,
Yes.
It'll be okay. Brilliant. So thank you, Massimo. As you mentioned, I have quite a vast experience and background when it comes to content, digital marketing and e-commerce. And what I had noticed at the beginning of last year, this was pre-pandemic, was this missed opportunity when it came to personalizing the digital experience. You know, the average person will visit a website 5 to 23 times a day, and that's just the average person. So that's not you or I, who's very much involved in this world. So if you think about that, you have to start considering what would make somebody land on your website and want to find out more. Not only that, but revisit it. So as someone with a fashion background, I thought, well, this is really important for brands in order to be able to advance and move forwards. They have such wonderful activations. We have fashion shows, we have, brilliant marketing displays and, different activities that we're putting around all across the globe in the physical world. But how can we really advance that in the digital world and capture the consumer? So as you can see on the screen, Human Commerce. This was an initiative that I created through the digital agency that I had at Content and Social Media at. And I thought to myself, actually personalizing the experience and putting the human at the forefront of this whole experience online is definitely what is needed. But how can we do it? Which brands are doing it? And where are the missed opportunities in order to help accelerate those newer brands, those brands of today? So I decided to pull together this campaign. Now, as I mentioned, this was pre-pandemic. So I thought, well, I'm going to have access to lots of people. I can interview people in the real world. I can visit their stores. I can see what they're doing online. And I can create some form of report that would help other brands, other designers, other marketing strategists. So the what is where I started. And I thought to myself, okay, this intersection between the product, the clothes, the brand, the consumer, someone who's investing in this, and then the technology to be able to bridge it all together. What was actually taking place right now? And then I started to consider the why. So if we think about pre-pandemic, we're still shopping in stores. We're, considering online, we're shopping online. Generally what was happening when it came to consumer trends is that we were discovering new brands. We'd scroll through Instagram, we'd get to a certain product, and then we'd go off to their website. We'd see what they offer and then maybe go into the store. But it wasn't our ultimate decision was to buy online. However, obviously 2020, as we move on in later in the year, that all changes. But I wanted to figure out what are the consumer desires. They wanted shopping availability, they wanted convenience and accessibility. And then the how, what are the solutions there? So, okay, fine, every brand has to have a digital storefront. They have to have a website. We get that. But as a designer, as somebody in the fashion world, as a marketer or a strategist, How do we stand out? How do we make that different? How do we get that consumer to come back to our website and be a returning customer, as opposed to someone who's just in the awareness stage? So, of course, when I'm pulling all of this together, I have to think about, okay, what is actually happening right now? So, as I was creating this, the prediction was the year that we're in now, which is there's definitely a lot more, but at that time it was 2.14 billion people worldwide were expected to buy goods and services online. So that was up by 1.66. Of course, these figures are ultimately very high compared to this. They've increased rapidly at such a phenomenal state because people have had to adapt to online. We also realized in the UK that all of the sales were going to go up 21% higher when it came to online shopping. People wanted to make purchases online. They were ready, they had it open, whether it be on their mobile, on their desktop. In fact, what we did find is a lot more people were spending more time on desktop, which ultimately changes the whole digital experience. So all of these numbers were floating around. This was what was taking place. And there were so many ways in which brands could really create that experience. But yet what we saw was that something was still missing. The brand identity, the experience that you would get going into the store from the minute you walked in and the sales assistant in a luxury boutique greets you and they give you that personalized, bespoke experience from the front door all the way around, curating what it is that you're supposed to be looking at, what it is that they think that you would want to see, and making sure you want to come back. All of that still needed to happen online. So how are they going to do it? So I realized technology was huge. That was ultimately where this was all going to be. Now, this is the report that I'm sharing with you. This was something that we were sending across all of our people that were involved within human commerce. And I'm basically cutting this down so that you don't have to read the whole thing and so that I can give you the key takeaways and the highlights. But what we noticed was because of 2020, humanity had never been as well connected as it had been last year, which also changed the way that we consumed content. We wanted personalized experiences. We wanted authenticity. We didn't want everything to be edited because we saw behind that, we saw people in their real stages and their real environments. So consumers were adapting and shifting towards more authentic content, real and edited content, content that spoke to them, content that was timely, that was reactive. All of this was important in order to be able to create this website that was, of course, current. That's the other thing with digital storefronts. They have to be current. They have to be in the now. And then what we did is obviously created this campaign. So you'll see that once the pandemic started, it was in March, and you'll see some of our interviews, but I realized that this was actually more important than it had ever been before. So even though we started it in January, in March, I realized actually digital is ultimately the way forward for brands, especially when it came to the fashion brands. As an agency, we deal with a lot of fashion brands, and many had websites. And actually, if you look at the luxury brands, a lot of them had, of course, the websites, but it wasn't telling the story. It wasn't doing them justice because they had relied on their in-store experience. So there was something lost there. They were plowing all this money into the activations, into, the big sort of in-person experiences, but yet when you went onto their website, it wasn't giving you the same sort of experience that you would expect. So humanizing e-commerce, how do we do that? What is the human commerce experience? What I've done here is I've actually updated these slides now because obviously so much has happened over the last months, and three areas that I think are key for any sort of fashion brand to really be considering now from a global perspective as well is social shopping. And this comes in many different ways, but actually, and you see it with people being able to get in front of the camera and to whether take you around a store or take you through a collection, actually answer those questions, the live interaction, sort of, the live shopping that we used to have with QVC and HSN. having that in a social environment now is
Exactly.
so important.
It,
Tommy Hilfiger did it extremely well. And then what you'll have is the consumers being able to ask those direct questions. You have the brands to be able to showcase themselves in a way that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do on their website.
Lucy,
And
if I
also
may.
shoppable.
Yeah.
Sorry, Massimo, did you say something?
No, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say this old school sort of QVC online shopping. With the platform Twitch, lots of brands are
Yeah.
doing that. Well, as you know, I'm based in Miami in the design district, and I see so many people actually inside the store with the camera kind of filming and explaining the product to the people and actually zooming in. It's insane how we've kind of gone that way. I just wanted to ask one question. With
Yeah.
digitalization, with COVID, we all had to go online. And you mentioned something very important about shopping in store, the personal experience. But currently, we've got 5 generations alive. We've got sort of
Yeah.
our grandparents, our parents, there's us, there's the millennials and the Generation Z. So you've got this whole group or this whole segment who were not used to digital. Like, was this something, like my grandmother had to learn, who's 90, had to learn how to use sort of like FaceTime and how to, shop online and that. So when you did your research, did you take into consideration maybe this segment of the market? Of having to educate
Definitely.
them to use social media and websites?
Definitely. And I think that was through the range of different brands that we were speaking to as well, because you would notice that depending on their industry, depending on their demographic, there was a level of importance when it came to the digital transformation. What was necessary and important to that consumer? So, for example, if the demographic was sort of 55 plus, were shoppable ads were social let me use that example first. Were shoppable ads as important? Probably not, because they're not inclined to shop that way first. We have to kind of blend them into what they currently know. But what they do gravitate towards is the social shopping sort of online, the QVC, the HSM, because if in fact it has a form of nostalgia to them, because they are familiar with that, but yet it's just on a different platform. So it's interesting, the trends and how they may seem futuristic, but yet at the same time we can pinpoint them back to something that specific demographic may actually be more
But
comfortable with than they expect.
yeah, they have this familiarity with sort of the QVC and having the person talking to them, selling the product, which is cool. Great.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry, I'll let you
Um,
continue.
No, no, Massimo, please jump in at any of these points, because I think it's really important. And some of the things that did come up in it, even though this campaign is less than a year old now, everything has changed dramatically. And it's important to kind of look at those trends that are springing up and what's happening. I think obviously, influencers, that's been a huge thing. There is definitely a shift and a change with how brands are working with the influencers now. I think we have to always go back to, why are influencers important? Why do people care about influencers? And it's because they believe that those influencers are accessible to them.
Can
They
I?
believe that they can have a conversation with them.
But it's really interesting. I mean, does the influencer still exist? Now we're moving on to CGI, which I know you and I have spoken about this before, but I still find this thing kind of scary. And I was reading yesterday about how in China they have what is called a VUP, a virtual upload, and this person doesn't exist, but this person or this creation is basically going online and talking about products, and it's just it's so crazy, so I'm always fascinated. Like, yes, the topic of humanization is so important. We're always talking about it, but yet we're getting more and more of these sort of, like CGI influencers also on Instagram, and all these like robots coming, and it's. I always find this baffling and frightening at the same time. So how do we humanize something like this?
I think by taking the example of, and it's not the same thing, but take an example of a chatbot. So they were created because of convenience,
Yeah.
because many different reasons, but it's simplified, it's streamlined, you can get the answers from the customers quicker, you can potentially give them a better experience. That was, the goal of a chatbot, is to be able to funnel them in a certain direction. When it comes to sort of an artificial influencer or spokesperson, maybe the way forwards with them is that it can help to funnel the customer down a certain route, because we can categorize these artificial influencers and make sure that they're getting into certain areas. But ultimately, when they get into those certain areas of the website, there will have to be a personalized experience. They will have to land and have that one-on-one connection. Otherwise, if you don't get to a real person when you've got a problem with a brand, and you've got through all these chatbots, or you've got through all of these voice messaging services, if you don't get that real person at the end, what happens is, I'm not going to go to that brand anymore because they don't care about me. So I feel like, yes, there's a place for these artificial influencers, but yet there will be a need for personalization and a need for humans at some point. And I do think that's where the live shopping comes in. And just on influencers, I think they're not going anywhere. They are shifting and they're changing, and they will have another name 10 years from now, because before the influencer, it was a celebrity endorsement. Before that, it was, the golden Hollywood. Like, there will always be an influencer. The next generation of influencers is the customer right now. That's what we see doing really well with our brands, is customer testimonials, customer, giving their real life experience. So influencers will stay. They will just have another name.
I like that.
Okay. And my thoughts on artificial intelligence and fake influencers.
No, I know. Okay.
But it's true, and it's really great, which actually brings the third point, which is reality check. So, there will be a need for the virtual reality and augmented reality, because of how things have changed and how we have to shop. So these are three sort of areas that, when it comes to humanizing e-commerce and creating it so that it doesn't necessarily mean the human is at the forefront, but the customer always is really important. I'd like to quickly share a video. Actually, I'm looking at time at the same time. So Massimo, do jump in if you want me to speed on up right now. But I will go ahead and play a short video, if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
Oh. The resurrection. In fact, I'm not going to do that because we're going to get echoes. But what I will do is make sure those videos are shared so that you can watch them. But that was just part of the series. We've got 2 screens right now. So I'll leave that all with you. I'll keep you in suspense right there. But I will make sure that that is all shared. So as we created this campaign, of course, whenever you're doing an initiative or a report, you can't just have a thought, you can't just have a take on something. You actually have to go out there and see what is actually happening. The agency that I'm at, of course, we have a lot of marketers that we deal with, a lot of directors and founders. So we went out and put out that questionnaire to make sure that, this was actually taking place. People were interested in digital transformation and that humanizing commerce was a thing. We interviewed global leaders. We've, interviewed founders of different technology companies. There was a whole range of different brands as well, with different types of audiences. And that was where we pulled up all of our information. Now, throughout the experts that we spoke to, it's interesting, some of their sort of feedback of what was taking place. So there was a quote which says, companies have a responsibility to identify their company's environmental implications and come up with sustainable solutions. Now, I'm not saying anything new here. You know that sustainable solutions are important. However, adding this to the digital storefront, making sure the values are there, that the values can be experienced, that they're not just, in some kind of font or an image, but how do we actually bring life to the values of the brand that we're standing for? We also had Blue Bite. Now, Blue Bite's a really fascinating company. And what they do is they create, basically, it's like a chip that you can put in with products. And when you scan these chips, they bring to life content, and it's very personalized as well. This is great because if you go back to this point on sustainability, if you're looking at a bag and a brand is saying, well, this is sustainable because we made it this way and this is the supply chain that it went through. But physically, when you get it, you may have the video playing on the website, but when you get the product, you scan and it brings to life this video and it will show you how it's all been made, your specific bag.
That's
Um,
amazing.
to me, it comes down to three things: consistency, recognizability, and personalization. That was from the founder of P&Co. Real life experiences need to be created online. And I think that's just a great statement for a discussion. How do real life experiences be created online when we live in a world full of reality TV that we know is not real? So these are the things where you have to consider, well, where's my consumer at right now? What have they been exposed to? What is important? And how do I go above and beyond to meet their expectations? And then finally, as a general trend, consumers are getting more and more e-commerce savvy and hence are having higher expectations on the whole customer journey. So all in all, our consumers are very demanding in a good way because they deserve to be. They've had time to think. They've had time to consciously decide which brands they want to invest in. Now, here's some interesting numbers right here. 93% of marketers surveyed through our report agreed that the use of technology has been important to maintain sales during lockdown. However, 79% of marketers surveyed confirmed that they already had the infrastructure in place to sell online, but what was happening was that they weren't ultimately giving that experience. So the infrastructure's there for a lot of brands, but what's happening is they're not bringing it to life. And then we have another video. Again, these will all be shared with you, but the next generation of influencers will be the consumer, which is what I've just spoken about with Massimo there. It is, human commerce is about, of course, putting the customer at the forefront of the experience, but once they've actually experienced your brand, how do you then translate that? How do you bring their audio to life? I think audio is missed a lot when it comes to websites. How can you create that buzz? How can you really touch on all senses that you would do if they were coming into your store? And how can you do that to your consumer who's coming onto your website and really get the full effect of what a customer experience is once they choose your brand? And some more numbers, 60% of marketers said that improving the purchase journey would be a key focus post-COVID. And it's definitely what we've seen, whether it come to flexible payment options, whether it come to the shipping and return options, how do you create mini carts on your website? How do you make sure that the whole journey is as simple and streamlined as possible, but at the same time make it personalized and show your bespoke options? And if this is a website where you are creating one-of-a-kind pieces, how do you still epitomize what that brand stands for and capture the consumer's attention? I have done some work with a brand who are fantastic at selling online. Ultimately, their whole brand has been built through social media, but they specialize in one-of-a-kind antique jewelry pieces, luxury. And the amount that they sell at the pace that they sell, you can't say, well, it's because of the way that it's so streamlined on their website, because it really isn't. What it is the experience. They also do something where they've actually curated a club, a very high class club for their best-selling customers. They use WhatsApp. They share all the updates, news. They go live shopping at markets and ask the customer what should they be investing in, what should they be choosing for their next collection, so that the customer feels as though they are actually making decisions. They are invested not only in the products because they're buying the products, but in the brand as a whole and the future of what the brand will become. And then these are some of the people that we've been fortunate enough to kind of highlight throughout the campaign. And then finally, this number, 71% of marketers surveyed confirmed that they will be investing in a more interactive and immersive online selling experience. And I think that's important for us all to think about. How is your site interactive, immersive, and how do you get that consumer come back and want more? Now, at this point, Massimo, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. What I do have is sort of highlights of what people have said along the way of what they think is important. I'm also conscious of time, so I can go through that. And then I also wanted to kind of touch on something that we've noticed coming out of this campaign and something that I'm kind of focusing on moving forwards.
No, I just wanted to say one thing. I looked at the case studies that you sent through, and it was interesting how they have all these platforms, and it just made me think of transmedia storytelling, which movies used to do that a lot. Like sort of, if you're looking at Marvel Comics or DC, whenever a new movie's coming out, they will publish a comic strip first because they want maybe a different type of demographics to become, to know the backstory of the character. You want to become involved, and the idea of transmedia storytelling in the entertainment world is sort of to be able to tell a narrative and for people to experience the same narrative but maybe from different perspectives. And it's just interesting now how fashion is moving a lot into film. We've got all these platforms, and how we're trying to be consistent in telling a narrative across different platforms, but also trying to tell it in a different way without losing an identity. So I think we're in a very exciting period now, very creative period for digital marketing.
Definitely. And I think that because there are so many options, what can be lost is, what is the ultimate goal? Where do you want them to land? Where is your headquarters? Yeah. Where is your flagship store? Because there are so many opportunities to create so many enticing and immersive experiences, but where do we funnel them back to get them to come back? And also so that it drives results for the brand and doesn't get lost doing it for another platform that isn't necessarily, a direct support system for your own brand and company.
Absolutely. I also just wanted to say that I had done a research because I had to do a presentation for the Latin American Fashion Summit, and when I first started, I noticed, it came out that Latin America wasn't really digital savvy. So it's a continent that still does cash in hand transactions. So most of the countries, they found it difficult suddenly with lockdown to have to transfer to online. But fast forward a year later, they've taken these like giant leaps where banks have started creating wallets. Things are more accessible online. I think they've been very successful in educating the population into adapting to this digital world. So it was an amazing case study to see. But yes, if we could just talk about the resale and the re-commerce, I think it would be great to hear about that before we leave as well.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, it kind of plays into what you were saying there, about transmedia and how we do it. So throughout all of this, I'm seeing the development of these websites and the digital strategy. And what I then started to notice was, and it's something that I'm very much involved in, but secondhand, vintage and reselling. And I'll go back to that brand that I said that I worked with, which is vintage luxury jewelry. So there is a huge market when it comes to reselling and secondhand. And the reason why I think this is important for this conversation, because as fashion brands, as people involved within the fashion world, ultimately we want our pieces, our products, our brands to continue on. We're looking at longevity. And now what we're seeing is there are so many platforms that are reselling products and making money from it. And there is a demand there from consumers. So it goes back to the point at the beginning, what is the consumer trend? What is the consumer mindset at right now? And they want to be able to, yes, they may not be able to afford that brand new piece when it first comes out, but from a reselling market, they are going to have access to it. Recently, we pulled together and I'll just pull this to the end now so it's not distracting everybody. But what we did is we pulled together some information from other brands about how they are looking at incorporating secondhand in the future. And I think that the main sort of consensus here is that they are not at a point where they're thinking, oh, well, we're going to have a secondhand section on our website because of the logistics of everything. But what there is an opportunity to partner with those marketplaces, to partner with those platforms that do sell secondhand. And therefore, having that as part of your structure ultimately broadens the amount of people that will be, coming to your brand. It also strengthens your stance when it comes to sustainability and what you are doing when it comes to values as well. Now, moving on to sort of strategy and how does all this exist? So I'm actually testing something out right now, and I thought this might be useful if you're thinking about all of this sort of content and ideas and how to make it an immersive experience. How do you do that? So I have a platform called Secondhand Styling, and we have a series of videos coming out right now in September. These videos are like the product. They will live on the headquarters, which is the website. But how do I drive so many people from social, from blogs to the website? And what we're doing is a mixture of going into secondhand stores, curating specific rails so that people, the week of the power suit, can go into that secondhand store. They can look at what we're doing. We're giving them a physical experience. There'll be QR codes that they can scan to then get into our social community. We'll also have a private WhatsApp group. Everything is generating and enticing that consumer to come to the website. So regardless of secondhand and reselling, that strategy there is a way to really think about all of the different areas that you can create content, but ultimately drives them to one place. And then I would just leave it with the fact that, yes, human commerce and personalizing the experience, it is about putting the consumer at the forefront, but it's also about understanding your own brand. What are you capable of? What is important to you? What will be important to your customer? And making priorities in how you transform digitally, with hopefully the final thought being that secondhand and reselling is something that your brand would one day potentially be open to. And if so, maybe now is the time to really start looking at those markets, looking at those platforms that they could potentially be a partner with, so that you can start strengthening that infrastructure and building that foundation from the get-go.
Absolutely. Lucy, thank you so much. I just wanted to mention one thing about the sustainability. In one of your slides, you spoke about traceability.
Yeah.
The company EON and Source Mapping, they've actually teamed up with YKK, the zip company, and inside the zip pool, they've put like a microchip. So inside the YKK zip pool, you'll be able to see the history of the product, and I just think that's so great. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
I'll
That's
send-
the sort of stuff we like.
I'll send you the link. I just want to say as well, before we leave you, once again, thank you so much for joining us. If you're interested to find out more and you want to connect with Lucy, please connect with her via your Instagram, also in LinkedIn. She posts a lot of amazing reports and everything, and her case studies on there as well. So please do connect with her on LinkedIn. And Lucy, thank you so much for joining us here in Costa Rica Fashion Week, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much,
All right.
Massimo.
Have a great day.
Have a
Bye-bye.